Hello, everyone. Neil, you got my mics? Good? We're good. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Can everyone hear? Back there? No?
No.
Jesse, can you hear me? No? Yeah. We did it.
Hello.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. Holy smokes. First prediction was way less people would show up. So we're already off, but that's good. That's a good one to be wrong on. Some real detail stuff. This might take like a bit over an hour. Bathrooms, if you need to, all the way down there on the right or left, you'll find them. If you want a refill of drink, go help yourself behind the bar. And then we're filming this, so I don't know, just keep that in mind. Or maybe if you work at another ad agency and don't want to be on screen, like
watch out.
Steal a hat from our front of our store. But yeah, nearly now. I guess we should quickly do who are we, where are we, what is this? Those are all good things. So yeah, who are we? Yeah, who are you? Yeah.
I mean, with our great headshots that we took about 10 minutes ago. So I'm Jared Gordon. This is my partner, Corinne Prudian, with a third partner, Dylan, who's not here today. We're the managing directors of Faculty of Change. So we work with traditional legacy organizations to uncover new sources of growth. We've been putting these together for about 5-6 years now. And we're really excited to finally partner with, we've worked close with the team at OneMethod for a long time to partner with them on this year's predictions. We took last year off because it was too hard to predict. So, we really only do the easy ones. So we're excited to be back this year with a whole new set.
Ones. Yeah.
Now the world's settled down a little.
And I'm Max, Managing Director, OneMethod. And I guess two things jump out there. One is a lot of managers here. So I feel like even if our predictions are off, we got a lot of pressure on us to manage the predictions well. And then, the three of us are so lucky because we get to present a lot of great work, but a lot of people help with this. So a lot of people help write, design, throw the event. A lot of people are here. A few smart folks from our team are stuck in Quebec, so they couldn't join. Is your team here?
So Dylan, our third managing partner, is in Halifax. He's not here, but he contributed. Thank you, Dylan. Yeah. And Chelsea, our strategist, right there, co-wrote a lot of the stuff that we'll be sharing today. So yes, we have our team represented here.
Shout out to Neil. How great does Neil look over there behind the boards? Yeah. What else? I feel like, so who are...
Neil's our Paul Schaefer tonight, by the way. So. Sorry.
We need a mic.
Sorry for dating myself.
So did you covered Faculty of Change?
We did,
pretty well? Okay, so OneMethod. OneMethod is, we're a creative agency. We deviate by design is what we often say. We do so many different things, but always try to do things differently, beautifully and purposefully. And that part's pretty clear. I think what's interesting is that little icon between Faculty of Change and OneMethod is the icon for the Combine. A lot of people ask us, what is the Combine? We are in the Combine. The Combine is something created by 4 agencies, actually. Ben Simon Byrne, Narrative, OneMethod, and Folk. And the crudest version of it is that the Combine is our hybrid office for those 4 agencies. But really, it's so much more. It's really an effort to transform this conventional office into a community-driven space that is designed for working, making, shopping, living, and learning. Hopefully tonight a little learning. So we have a store in the front, cafe upstairs, the bar at the back. We got a magazine, a podcast. We have members, and we have events like tonight. So thank you all so much for coming to this event. And speaking of that event, Corinne, do you want to tell them a little bit about?
Sure. Oh, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, what's up?
So what's up? We're here to talk about the themes of change and our predictions. We're super excited about it. Really what we've done is taken a look back at the work we've done throughout the years for different clients, for different industries. And throughout all that time, all the research that we've done, we've kind of distilled it down to these kind of 10 overarching themes of change that speak to what's happening in culture, in commerce, and society. And so each one of those 10 themes of change, overarching themes of change, has 2-3 predictions inside of them. So what we think or how we think each one of these might play out in the next year or so. They may end up being right, they may not, but that's the fun of it. So
I would say if your predictions are all right, you're doing it wrong. That's not interesting. and
Yeah.
that means you're taking it too easy.
Yes.
So hopefully a bunch of these are wrong, but
Yeah.
the goal is thought and change, and to inspire you to think differently next time you have a brief or a project or whatever it might be.
Exactly. So if you've signed up and you're here, thank you so much. You'll receive a report. If you haven't signed up, please make sure someone has your contact info. We'll get you that report thingy when we get it
Next
sorted.
week? Yeah.
Next
Yes.
week, Wednesday.
When we get it sorted. Yeah. So a word about our process. I mean, it's more, frankly, madness than method, but there's method in there. We've basically gone back through the thousands of signals of change that we collected over the last year, and took a look at them and distilled them down. And we went through hundreds of communities of folks, either online or offline, IRL. And frankly, took that down into like dozens of convos, debates, pivots, repivots.
So many repivots.
So many repivots.
And yeah, that's what we're going to cover off today.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's dive right in.
So the first one is smarter cities. So this is really about the new ways in which physical communities are being connected and created, right? We're moving away from this whole notion of connected infrastructure still exists, but there's a little bit less hype about it nowadays, a little bit more community oriented. So we thought about all the things that have changed and happened since 2021. You've heard all these things, the Great Recession, the decline of 9-to-5 commuters, the hollowing out of the downtown cores in our major cities. We thought, so what's going to happen to the downtowns? The last time downtown was a bad place, it kind of gave birth to the suburb, right? It was like the place you went to, you were upwardly mobile, and you traded in the grime and noise and congestion of the city for peaceful, sprawling lifestyle in a suburb. Great. But the upwardly mobile these days, I don't know that that's everyone's jam. So as the commercial market downtown is sort of hollowing out and we have all these vacant office spaces, you can get creative and do something like this, or you could maybe convert them into housing. So there's a big trend towards taking a look at a lot of office buildings across North America in major cities, currently underway by an architecture firm called Gensler primarily. Others are doing it. They've looked at about 500 buildings across North America and have actually already started converting about 50 of them into housing, determining which ones are the most profitable to switch over and sustainable, frankly, to switch over, because a lot of the refits are tough on the environment. So what that means is you can expect a refitting of our downtowns, making them more walkable, making them more livable, not just the place you go to between 9 and 5. And then maybe +5 if you're sticking around at the bars downtown. And then you'll see a refitting of Midtown. The OG restaurants that had their spots in the downtown started already in Toronto, opening up their secondary locations in the Midtown area. Basically, the prediction is Midtown will look more like downtown, downtown will look more like Midtown.
Diffusion.
We've also seen a lot of these kind of nouveau communities sprouting out in different parts of the US primarily, but there are also some that are being developed in US and the UAE. And these places are really geared towards your classic work remote kind of employees. So with a twist, things like cul-de-sac, which is in the United States, it's very much geared towards remote workers, people who are not commuting, but also the plus is it's an entirely car-free community. Also Tolosa, which we read about and learned about, it's a community that's geared towards content creators and influencers. So you've got access to production facilities and editing facilities all within your kind of built-in community. So even Bill Gates is getting in on the game. We believe knowledge workers will start flocking more and more to these cities. They're the upwardly mobile of today's, version. And then what's more is that we predict that people will start choosing where they live based on vibe, based on values, right? So based on like-mindedness. So we give the example here of Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. And yeah, it's it's 65 plus, and you're not allowed there unless you're under the age of 65, unless you're married to somebody or something like this. They're basically all drunk and playing golf all the time, but it has one of the highest happiness ratings of all the communities in the world. And so that's got to tell you something. There's a pull towards similar lifestyle, similar values, similar kind of living community life. So we'll see more of those, but for non-oldos as well. So that's the first one. Living behind the algo is the second. This represents a pretty hard shift away from channel surfing, which nobody has cable anymore anyways, but a shift towards swiping left, but not just in a dating capacity, in all parts of life. So if you've ever bought a CD like me from HMV, you probably are more like me, but if you've never bought a CD off of a physical rack, you've probably also never consumed algorithmically served up content. So basically what we're saying is that all these Spotify playlists, all the TikTok For You pages, all the Netflix home pages, they really represent content that's been selected for you, right? For you, yeah. Except that it's really about all the powers that be behind all these platforms, and it's not really about what you genuinely like and have been watching. I don't want to say Santa doesn't exist, but it's not really about your preferences. It's really about what's good for business, right? We all know this. So newer generations of content consumers don't really think about choosing content. They think about being served content, which is a little bit of a shift. And our Gen Z pals have been doing this for a long time, training their algorithms, pruning their preferences. So what changes? Ultimately, we believe everyone will start doing this. It's really about modeling your very best behavior. So in other words, oh, I like this video, I'm going to watch it twice. This is a great song, I'm going to put it on repeat and then leave the room. So if you like something, you're going to accept cookies and do your Google searching, effectively training the algorithm to recognize more readily your preferences, such that at the end of the year when you get your Spotify Wrapped list, it's actually the work you put in is reflected in that Spotify Wrapped playlist. And this also, frankly, means that there's going to be a little less of the weird, those obscure hidden songs that you happen upon by accident. And you're like, wow, I really like this band. I didn't even know that they existed. It's going to happen less. They're going to get buried more. And the big artists and the big the big stuff will get more eyeballs on it. We'll have more eyeballs driven to it. So that is behind the algo. Third up. Touring goes nowhere. I think this is a fan favorite of ours. Chelsea, thank you so much for writing this one up. She did a lot of this work here. The change that we're really seeing here is suggesting kind of a new normal for a lot of artists and musicians. So a stat, frankly, I wasn't familiar with is that artists make on average about half a cent per listen, which means that they need, what's the statistic here? I can't do the math in my head. Thank you. 6 million streams per song to make an income of $30,000. I don't know about you, but that's not really a substantial livelihood. So what they relied on is a lot of touring in order to make up the difference and make up their income. So ticket sales, yes, but also merch sales and the added fan base and kind of popularity that they get from being on tour. That's not really possible anymore because you've got supply chain shortages, thank you so much, COVID, and labor shortages and inflation. It makes it very hard and very uneconomical as a smaller artist to find your spot in the spotlight, unfortunately. Which means that our first prediction here is that we're going to see a rise in touring residencies. We've seen this already. Vegas has been doing it for decades. It's not really new. But as opposed to only artists kind of living and playing out the end of their careers in the desert, we're going to see a lot more artists doing this. The best example of it is Harry Styles. He did 15 nights at Madison Square Gardens, sold out. I happened to be passing through New York in the time when Harry Styles was doing his residency. I cannot tell you how many pink feather boas I saw going through customs. It was wild. But really, it works, right? Instead of doing 40 shows in 30 cities, you're going to do 40 shows in 5 cities. You're going to stay put as an artist. And what that really means is that the band isn't the one hitting the road. It's us. We're going to be buying the tickets. We're going to be buying the plane tickets. We're going to be getting the hotel rooms to go see the fans, to go see the artists that we like. This also means that the $20 kind of obscure club show that you went to because you kind of know the band and you kind of know one of their songs, but hey, let's go see them live, it's just not going to happen anymore. It's just not economical. It's too bad because I did that a lot. But anyways, and then what you can look forward to is a little bit more of these listening bars. Longtime favorite and very popular in Japan. We're going to start seeing a little bit more of that in closer to home. So the best of them will probably have like a celebrity backer kind of audiophile with the best sound system like Mark Ronson's Pebble Bar in Midtown Manhattan. So we'll start seeing a little bit more of that kind of action and around music and listening. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Corinne. So we also include something we called the pre-cycling bin, and these are basically themes and change that didn't kind of get there for us, but we still thought were really important. And we thought we'd really start on a high note with climate terrorism. You know, we're all going to die, just not in the way in which we currently expect to. But we figured we'd start at the bottom and kind of work up emotionally from there.
Yeah.
So 2023 is the year in which we are going to experience a major act of climate terrorism. Probably. Maybe. Thanks, Neil. You know, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but there's this idea and like discussion around the concept of permacrisis. Every year, we rinse and repeat the same challenges, and we never solve them, right? We always end up in the same place at the end of the year, and 2023 is the year in which that breaks. You know, we're not going to respond to climate change through COP27. Okay, that's a terrible joke, but I typed it out, now I read it, I feel very uncomfortable saying it. But, you know, we're gonna start seeing more and more acts of these ways of climate terrorism. You know, there was pipeline damage across the United States and Nord Stream last year as well in 21 and 22 that are kind of early acts of climate terrorism. But when you have over 1 billion people who are gonna be displaced in the next 5 years because of climate terrorism, we know exactly who to blame, you know, in our minds, right? Oil company CEOs and the like. It puts a massive target on them, especially their infrastructure as well. So, you know, when will a handful of the 1 billion kind of probably take arms and take action? Our guess is 2023. Now, on a lighter note, you can unclench a little bit, more of a little classic prediction of us. 2023 is the year we go back to the movies, but not for the reasons you're probably thinking. We're gonna go back ironically. You know, the movies are gonna take the role of bowling or roller skating. They're gonna be this act of nostalgia that we attend to wash over us. I mean, you know, the content just isn't good enough to justify it. I mean, Magic Mike's Last Dance is coming out in a couple months, but like, you know, yeah, exact couple cheers for Channing. But really, you know, what we're talking about here is, you know, ironic attendance. And we saw the early seeds of that in 21 and 22 with Distinguished Gentlemen. Anyone know what Distinguished Gentlemen was? It was this movement where Gen Z were dressing up in suits and going to see the Minions movie en masse, such that you weren't allowed to wear a suit to go see the Minions, which is like a crazy statement that, you know, whoever would have thought. But, you know, I think it's really going to go mass. That movies are going to kind of, the cinema attendance experience is going to really be an act of nostalgia versus like, you know, an act of content consumption in a way that traditionally has. Now, Max?
Yeah, back to the themes. Theme number 4, RIP beer, which sounds sad, but it's not. And it's a little clickbaity because beer is not actually going anywhere, but there's definitely been a decline in growth. And, you know, one of the first signals, actually outside of like client work, I was at a guy's weekend at a cottage.
0 of 9.
This guy's cottage, actually. And yeah, 9 40-somethings sitting around listening to our one single friend tell like sexy but kind of scary stories about being single. And 0 of 9 people were drinking beer. And it was, I mean, that was a shocking moment. So then together we sort of stepped back and started looking for, that was kind of a weak signal. But stronger signals, there's definitely like all the models are projecting beer growth just definitely tapering off, slowing down. The most dramatic one we saw is there, like 1.8% growth. Some models have it much higher, but even just the delta between, you know, traditional beer at 1.8 and then non-alcoholic beer at 8% is like pretty significant. And I don't think it's that surprising, probably. Like, I think for the last decade plus, we're seeing like lad culture and bro culture get pushed to sort of more and more to the fringes. I don't know if anyone watched like Woodstock 99. It's like terrifying watching what like boozy bros used to do, right? And I think even younger generations see that and are like, think it's like absolutely out of control. So, you know, you've got that paired with like seltzers on the rise, non-alcoholic beers, mocktails at every restaurant you go to now have like really interesting mocktail offerings. So I think it's pretty obvious. And the question is, you know, what happens next? I think on a big scale, the big broad prediction is that these beer companies are going to transition into like beverage brands, and we're seeing already a bit of that. But then if we want to get a little more specific, we got two kind of softballs. You're probably going to order a non-alcoholic pint of beer this year, which sounded probably crazy 5 years ago.
I feel like because you said that, people are going to do it.
Now you're going to do it, yeah. No, probably you'll be at a bar and someone will, they haven't been on tap ever. And it just started in London last year, and they're like, it's not killing it, but they're not, like people are actually buying them and drinking them. The other one is another kind of softball here is, non-beer brands are going to start selling beer. So collaborations, nothing new. Crazy collabs all last year in like the fashion world, but I think what we're going to see is brands that you would never expect to collaborate are going to start collaborating, and beer is going to be a space we'll see that. So the joke we had is like Aesop and Sapporo. Like a Sapporo will be a beer, and you'll be like, why is that a thing? Who knows? Like Patagonia's already done this, but it's on a really small scale. It's really like a craft beer. It's a kind of a smaller thing. We're going to see it on a big scale, and you're probably going to see weird collabs in other categories as well, like real big weird collaborations. But the big one here, or the one that I like the most, is that a non-alcoholic beer is going to start acting like an energy drink. So we're going to see like a big brewer just go full Red Bull, and I think it's exciting. I think it's interesting. Like Budweiser Zero, Gravity Games, or something like that is going to happen, and it's just a real shift from like music, or beer has often been like with music and like a real specific corner of culture, and I think it's going to start busting out of that corner and try to find different ways for it to sort of tap into our lives as a lot of us maybe move away from beer. So that's theme of change number 4, RIP beer. Next up, we have virtual influence and our return to the mascot. I think like it's kind of, crazy these days. Like imagine for brands connecting their brand to influencers, celebrities, creators is like really risky these days, right? Like you can imagine why a brand would be scared of that. I think not that long ago, Kanye walked into Skechers and they were like, no, we're not interested. And then they like went out and told the world, like, we're not interested in Kanye. And that was the news story, right? Like they didn't want the influencer or the celebrity connected to their brand. And we're definitely going to see more than that. And then on the other side, like crazy, crazy advances in animation technology, generative art, and just, kids in basements making virtual characters is very much happening. And this stat kind of blew my mind. 6 out of 10 people apparently follow a virtual influencer. Like that, I don't know if that's true. Maybe you don't have to raise your hand, but like give me some subtle nods if you follow a virtual influencer. Yes, Geeta does. Anyone else? Like Barbie.
Gritty.
You follow Gritty. Barbie. I mean, Gritty's kind of IRL though.
But he's a mascot.
He is a mascot. You follow a mascot.
Yeah.
Who's the other virtual influencer we were talking about?
Lil Miquela.
Anyone follow her?
3 million followers.
I think I was going to say up to like 6. So Lil Miquela dropped like a music video at Coachella's virtual music festival last year, which is a sentence that makes me feel old saying. Like I didn't know the virtual conference or the virtual music festival was a thing. So yeah, that to me is really interesting. And so it's already kind of here, but what's next? And so yeah, we're taking some swings. We think a brand is going to buy a virtual influencer. So right now we're seeing brands partner with virtual influencers, like Gucci and Fenty have worked with Lil Miquela. But I think it just makes sense that a brand's just going to come straight up. We're going to see that headline of like brand X buys virtual influencer B, and it'll be interesting because they will own that person and own that likeness. And yeah, you can't really cancel. I think what was the sentence you said? You can't cancel
a mascot. Yeah.
Yeah, Phil or Gritty.
The Philly Fanatic. That's right.
Yeah, you can't cancel the Philly Fanatic. Yeah, so it's like it's pretty interesting space. And yeah, if you want to make money, I guess go on, try to make a virtual influencer right now, and then you could sell it to a brand. And then the other one we have is, we will all become more mascotty. So a lot of people have dipped their toe. Bitmoji, Memoji, Wemoji, like all the emojis. And I don't think like metaverse necessarily took off, but something this year is going to make a lot of people in this room actually think about their virtual mascot, developing an avatar. And we've just been all around it nearby, but something's going to come and push us into that world, real deal.
Video.
Okay, next one is, so I said beer wasn't sad. This one is sad. Generation depressed, united we sad. Probably sad, but not surprising, right? Like depression, anxiety are skyrocketing for everyone, especially younger generations. We got COVID, inflation, war, probably not going anywhere. Some big signals that we saw is like, crying makeup tutorials, 130 million views across social. We see like CEOs on LinkedIn crying. We see celebrities like Bella Hadid on Instagram crying. And then like the third most popular emoji in the world is the bawling emoji. Does anyone know the number one? Can anyone guess?
Salute?
No. Knife? That's deep. No.
I like it.
Tears of joy. So it's still in the tear family. Tears of joy is number one for the last decade. In actually 2015, it was the word of the year, was the tears of joy emoji, which is wild. And at one point last year, the like full-on bawling emoji surpassed tears of joy for the first time in 10 years. That tears of joy hadn't been number one. Number two, do you guys know the number two emoji?
No.
It's boring. It's a real boring. It's just a heart. It's not cool. So yeah, like definitely, I think the takeaway there from those signals though is, of course, we're all getting sadder. That shouldn't surprise anyone, but people are sorry, it's true. But people are way more into sharing it and owning it, and that is a shift. So I think that helped us develop our predictions here, which is we're going to see this like a new shade of sadvertising is going to emerge this year. So sadvertising is not new. I started 15 years ago, Amin? I don't know, you don't. Yeah, about that. Who knows? He doesn't know. And when I remember when I started, it was like clear the dominant language in advertising was transitioning from comedy. Like for 30, 40 years, comedy was number one. 10, 15 years ago, we started pushing into emotional spaces and largely sadness, to be honest. And that's still here today. But the difference is, at least the prediction we're making is, up until now, largely the sadness has been, like the brand and the audience have been observers. Like we're on the outside. And the shift here is going to be, I think, we're coming inside. There's going to be advertising and marketing where the brand and the audience we're in the sadness together. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then the next one, a term Jared came up with that I love is the ketamine aesthetic. So every drug gets its own aesthetic, right? You can picture it, right? LSD, cannabis, cocaine. You can picture like what is the style that goes with that when that drug sort of emerged and took off. And ketamine, other antidepressant drugs have been like skyrocketing in usage. There hasn't been a defined style. We don't know what the style is. We don't have that prediction. But that style will emerge this year. And that's going to be a distinct moment in time where it's like, they might not call it the ketamine aesthetic, but it will jump out. I don't know, anything to add on that one, Jared?
No, I think that's fair. Like you hear about the core aesthetic, which is, cozy core, cottage core, all these things kind of combined into one. And that, to me, that seems like it's a little bit leading the way, that like recession into warmth and protection through, either A, nostalgia, or B, kind of maximalism, protecting yourself with objects, moving away from minimalism, is I think kind of the early leader just from that. But this one I think is still up for grabs. And I think maybe that's because there hasn't been yet a mass adoption of ketamine as a recreational drug in the way that there has been of others. I mean, apparently it's coming. I don't know, but so we'll have to see where this one goes.
Okay. So another pre-cycling bin, the ones that didn't quite make the full cut, but we still wanted to talk about them. Number 3, boomer ballast. So boomers have been overrepresented. There's a lot of boomer hate in a lot of our predictions. It's okay. Overrepresented in a lot of positions of power, cultural institutions, CEOs of large organizations. This is not news to anybody. But as they retire, as they decide through COVID and through inflation, they just don't want to have their businesses anymore. As they step down, step away, retire, there will be a changing of the guards. The gatekeepers of these cultural institutions will change up. And so, that dead weight will soften. The second one, work from car. I feel like this is pretty straightforward. Companies implementing work remote. We're spending a little more time commuting. We can work from wherever in a lot of cases. You may not move away totally, but you're moving around a little bit more. Plus, techs have a lot more advanced capabilities now. Zoom and Tesla are partnered up, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we think we'll start to see a lot more The backdrop being your car seat, basically.
Thanks, Corinne. I like this. So classic travel. Bleisure is blah. Let's get away, I think, is a great kind of summary here. Like so many things in life, travel kind of swings on a pendulum. We went from being tourists, up until the past kind of 15 years to then wanting to travel like a local. But, where are you a local? At home, and it sucks, right? So, we really we travel to transform. We want to come home different than when we left. We want to be more tan, more interesting, more informed, more rested. And so, what we're saying is that 2023 is the year we really get away. With, Expedia had a stat that 2/3 of people are planning to go big on their next trip. And what we're talking about is a return of real travel, Airbnb, Uber, discount carriers, they all made travel accessible, but they didn't make it enjoyable, right? If anyone's ever washed the sheets and gotten out of an Airbnb by 7 a.m. so they can flip it, that's a classic example. Or tried to get anywhere over the past holidays, just because you can afford it doesn't mean that it's enjoyable. And so real travel's coming back. Big trips, getting whatever version of White Lotus we can afford. This is gonna be 2023. Sure, we're going to travel less, but we'll travel better. And does anyone remember bleisure? Anyone remember hearing the term bleisure and feeling sick to their stomach?
Yes.
It was like this portmanteau that became popular. It's a combination of business and leisure, not bleh and leisure. And it was big marketing jargon. And it was in 2022, the number of business trips that included a weekend went up 5x. Mm-hmm. I think people have discovered that's terrible, right? You want to work, you want to play, you don't want to do both at the same time. And so we expect kind of a return to separation between work and leisure. But here's a problem, is that like a Taylor Swift concert, travel has a limited amount of supply and an incredible amount of demand. There's less seats at Mugaritz in San Sebastian than there is on a Gulfstream 8. So, how are you and your buddies going to pay for your $1,000 or get seats for your $1,000 plate meal? So there's this real kind of finite supply, and we're going to talk a lot about tonight, as you've heard already, and we'll continue to go, the idea of these algorithms kind of driving people to the same places. How many people here saw people on Instagram go to Positano last summer? Right? I mean, you're all nodding your heads, and people behind you are all raising their hands, I promise. And we can all listen to Drake at the same time, but we can't all hang out at his Cheesecake Factory-inspired mansion. And so when we think about real goods versus digital goods, there's such a limit to the ways in which you can consume them. So who here wants to go to Sicily? More hands up? Yeah. Who here wants to go to the Albanian Riviera? Okay. Yeah. I mean, trust me, it is apparently, I haven't been, but apparently it's just as nice and populated by celebrities like Bibi Rexha, Dua Lipa, and the Belushis. All famous Albanians, according to Wikipedia.
Okay.
But the problem is you wouldn't know that the Albanian Riviera exists, right? TikTok's never going to show it to you. It's not going to appear on your feed and Instagram. Yeah. But apparently it is a very lovely place. And so what needs to happen is to kind of get around some of these challenges, you really need to start wilding your inputs as they kind of relate to travel, because we're going to keep driving more people to the same places, and prices are going to go up and the experience is going to lessen. So, in this case, when it comes to travel and recommendations, you want to stay away from these best of lists, because being different here is just as important as being right. So, it's time to really swing for the fences with some of your travel choices in 2023. So, the idea behind the dark forest, this is one of my favorite kinds of predictions. It's, we're trying to kind of put language. I know the dark forest is a term coined by Yancey Strickler, the founder of Kickstarter 10, 15 years ago. But, this is something that I'm sure you're all feeling and experiencing, but might not have language to talk about. And so this is kind of what we're here about. So statistically in this room, we're really entering this dark forest era. Most of you probably have Instagram, and you're probably set to private, right? You might have downloaded TikTok, but you've never posted a video. And really what we're talking about here is this retreat away from some of these large platforms. But what you are doing is you're probably interacting in the group chat, And so, you might be on Twitter, you're probably consuming, but you're probably not tweeting. And so what's happening is all these conversations used to happen in public are now happening in private. Who here is a member of a Discord or private Slack community? Yeah, so you see it, right? It's like this idea that it used to be kind of one to many is now this concept of one to few. And 2023 is the year where that really accelerates rapidly. And Yancey Strickler's kind of point here is that taking these conversations private is dangerous because you avoid dissent. You're taking the discourse into kind of, like the protection provided by these dark forests tends to make the conversations a little bit, nastier and more unpleasant. That's why this concept of locker room talk exists. These exclusive spaces tend to kind of breed bad behaviors. But really, like, people, you're not going to have a choice, right? If you think about, the rise of Chat GPT and even like the suggested comments on LinkedIn. Anyone ever seen those? Congrats, et cetera. Like, it's going to get even worse. And your feeds in public spaces and the regular set of the internet are just going to be clogged with AI-driven either comments or suggestions, right? You could see easily how someone could rig up Chat GPT to auto-comment on every one of your Instagram posts. It's going to happen. And the comment section and the deluge is going to make it so noisy that your only choice is going to be to retreat to some of these dark forest spaces. And it's pretty terrible. So what happens to the influencers when there's no one left to influence, I really think, if there's no one left to get ready with me or enjoy my POV as a tech girly in Chicago, then how am I going to make my influencer income? And I think the fact is, the truth of the matter is, you got to enjoy them while they can, because they're going to disappear. There's going to be influencers on these platforms, be it the mods of your Discords or your servers, but their reach is going to be so limited. Before, where they would talk to 5 million people, they're going to talk to 5,000 people. So, the only place where people are really going to hit scale, I think, on the dark forest is probably OnlyFans, right? And that's going to be the only lucrative side hustle left for influencers.
Cool.
Next.
Heavy, thank you. Yeah, I love that one because we did a predictions thing in 2017 talking about how influencers were like an arbitrage at the time. You could pay, you were getting 6-to-1 return on investing in influencers, and that's been a decade later. It'll be, with that prediction, it'll be done, which is really interesting.
Way less.
But the last two, hits in our pre-cycling bin. So number 5 is busy podcast. This one, so we saw a signal. There's millions and millions of hours of meetings being recorded every day. You probably are on Zoom, and someone's like, hey, do you mind if we record this? Yeah. And someone's like, hey, will anyone watch this? No one's going to watch that video. But there's millions and millions of hours of this footage. And then on the other hand, again, we have powerful AI tools, machine learning. So the prediction was, hey, I bet someone's going to somehow mash this together, and we're going to have this product where you can just click a button and you'll get a little podcast from, here's the 10-minute highlights from your company yesterday. So you're driving to work, C-suite guy or girl who's super busy is just just give me the highlights of what happened in my company yesterday. And it's a cool idea. There's no broad theme around it, so we threw it in the bin, but we liked it. We thought it was cool. And then the last one here, so Jared said we're building from negative to something good. I don't know if I totally agree. I think goodbye pizza crust is pretty fucked up in my head, but we saw some signals that were pizza crusts. There might be some pizzas coming your way that have no crust. I don't like it. It's scary.
Sad for many people.
Yeah. The only thing scarier would be if Chicago style pizza was gonna take over. Yeah. That'd be scary, but
for many reasons.
Yeah.
Health included.
So Max, you introduced me to tavern style pizza, which I didn't know existed before, but apparently that's a crustless pizza?
The precursor, or getting there. They're tavern style is it's almost gone, and then we think coming up next is gone. I don't like it. But that's it for the bin. So I think we just got 2 more themes, and then we're out. So,
it used to be, if you wanted to be a really successful criminal, you had to have been born before the end of the Vietnam War. Think about it, Bernie Madoff, Tony Soprano, Enron executives, world dictators, they were all boomers, right? Crime at the highest levels was something that it took you years to get good at. But now, welcome to 2023, where all that has changed.
Yeah.
Crypto scammers sold 14 billion, right? We have Sam Bankman-Fried. Anyone know who Razzle Khan is? She is a crypto startup rapper who happened to steal $3.6 billion in Bitcoin that she's allegedly sitting on and allegedly stole. We have Anna Delvey, Elizabeth Holmes. We even have a millennial kleptocrat, a first really from 2021. His name is Nayib Bukele. He loves Miami. He issues volcano bonds, and he is currently the president of El Salvador. Question for how long. But, really what you're seeing here is a transition of crime away and into a much younger population for some of these master criminals. Who knows if they're master criminals since everyone I mentioned has been caught, but why? And it's because crime pays. It's incredibly lucrative these days to be a criminal. And I think there's kind of two reasons to it. One is supply and the other is demand. People are concerned about the future and don't know how they're going to kind of make their rent or buy their houses or afford the lives they've desired, so they're taking bigger risks. They're more susceptible to rug pulls in crypto. They're less diligent about investments. They're more attracted by these large returns. So when you have more rubes, you have more scores. Secondly, on the demand side, or the supply side, sorry, anything bad happened to any of those people I mentioned? SBF is living with his parents in sunny California. Razzle Khan is still, working from home. She just got her ankle monitoring terms adjusted so she can be CMO of a new startup.
Everyone knows who Anna Delvey is.
Yeah, everyone knows who Anna Delvey is, and she's making millions wearing an ankle bracelet. No one's caught Do Kwon, the mastermind behind Tether, even though he still tweets all the time. And it's possible that Elizabeth Holmes' book advance will be bigger than Prince Harry's, right? So crime is incredibly lucrative with very little consequences. And the question is like, what is driving? And we talked about the economic, social factors that possibly are motivating people to some of these larger crimes, but also, it's straight up vengeance. Like a lot of these younger people blame the older generations that came ahead for the situation they find themselves in. Climate change, affordability, inflation, all that kind of stuff. And so, this addiction to cheap credit and lifelong employment is something that isn't available to people. And the only way to really get there is through a life of crime. So I changed it on my slides, but so please, expect to see more crime in 2023. And then the last one is, because we had to talk about it, is spellcasting. And spellcasting is our take on the changes you're going to see driven by large language models sitting in front of computational advances and concepts like AI. And we're excited because how many people here have a liberal arts degree? Right? Yeah, see, if you didn't, you're probably doing something else. So, this is like the vengeance for those of us with a liberal arts degree. It's going to kind of drive a number of changes. Like I remember, you hear people talk about if you learn to code, you'll never go hungry. But now all of us who have been hungry for so long are finally going to get what's ours. And the first kind of thing is the end of the blank page, right? These new AI tools are going to always kind of be that first step that you use to kind of get started for everyone. And it's pretty exciting from that point. But really, we're excited because it's going to drastically improve the value of things like copywriting. You're used to getting paid kind of cents for words when you're writing long form, but when you think about the computational cost associated with running, a chat GPT or something like that call, it's about 40 cents now, but the OpenAI pays every time someone hits enter on chat GPT, right? So these costs are going to go through the roof as demand increases and there's limited supply when it comes to processing. So, every single prompt, every time you ask them to do something, is going to get more and more expensive, which is going to require increases in specificity and quality of the prompts. And who's best suited to do that? People who've been writing for a long time. And as well, the right prompt, generating the right image could save you thousands or generate millions in revenue. So expect to see, copywriting become a much more valued and well-compensated skill. Sorry. And then next is multi-working. Everybody heard those scare stories of the software engineers who had 3 jobs simultaneously during COVID. And whose fault is that? The engineer or the company hiring them? But there's always going to be this gap between early adopters and the rest of the world as they catch up. And you're hearing about it even now. People who automate themselves and a lot of their job functions through kind of leverage of these tools. And so there's going to be a lot more people out there with multiple jobs that maybe their employers don't know about, who are using kind of tools like this to really improve their own productivity. So Max, did you want to do a quick recap?
Hit it. Yeah, no. I think it's for the gang. Does anyone?
This is all of them.
We have a microphone. If anyone wants to add
criticize
any thoughts,
us, add anything,
critique, you could ask a question or go back to something or add. Definitely, this is not absolute here. Any thoughts?
Great presentation.
Thank you.
That's a great thought.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Mario.
you. Love a good plant.
Do we have any questions?
Neil, that could have used an air horn after that comment. Got you.
Hello. Loved the Prince Harry comment, by the way. That was quite funny. That made me laugh out loud. You mentioned the virtual influence and virtual influencers not being able to be cancelled.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the recent M&M situation?
Oh, yeah, that's a good
with them
question.
being replaced by, I've forgotten her name.
Was it Maya Rudolph?
Yes, that's it, Maya Rudolph.
When you said M&M, I'm a huge stan that everyone makes fun of me, and I was like, holy shit, is there M&M news that I don't know about? I think in that scenario, it's just more like the canceling. What we meant by you can't be canceled is like it's not a human, and you press delete and you move on. Was sort of
There's no real repercussions.
At least in that regard.
Yeah, like Baby Peanut, R.I.P.
Yeah, but that is really interesting. The sort of the back and forth that's happening with the M&Ms. Yeah, so I think they still can get canceled, but it's just the person who typed that thing or the business who okayed it is still just like delete and push it to the side versus when there's real humans involved, there seems to be much higher stakes.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't as sad as I would have been if it was a real person, so that makes sense.
Thank you for the question.
This better not be why am I an M&M stan? I don't want that question.
Yeah, that'd be going pretty good. So under youthful grift, talking about rise in crimes and digital things, and more of an observation, I guess, but I guess I'm jumping to like a lot of laws maybe can't keep up with our modern world. That therefore a lot of these people who are in modern crime haven't had any like huge ramifications. Did any of that kind of come up or bubble up when you were doing research?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting kind of point, but it's also, the profusion of digital thinking in an analog world. The types of problems people grow up solving now are much more different than those before. So like the exploitation of loopholes and things like that. Mm-hmm. There was a famous, recently, an SEC investigation into something called the Mango hack. And the Mango hack was the hack of a crypto exchange. It was actually perfectly legal. The code was open and the gap that the guy exploited was, I don't know, it wasn't obvious, but like he was smart enough to figure it out. And now the courts are reconciling with the fact that what he did was kind of legitimate, but he actually stole money. So that's like a big kind of challenge that I think is going to be this gap of people who can exploit these loopholes in ways that are against the spirit of the law, but technically kind of within its allowable parameters.
I mean, also, if the legal system can't really keep up between what's the right and what's the wrong, then you have much more opportunity just to kind of exploit what's going on.
Right. Yeah. Everything just becomes a shade of gray.
And I think part of it is that how this is going to be relevant to your businesses. Kind of taking it back is like you're going to want to. People will enjoy experiences and look for experiences where they get a sense that they're getting one over on somebody else. This kind of concept of building the grift into the experience itself. That movement away from some of these kinds of zero-sum concepts, more into being there first, or kind of more limited releases, which we've seen kind of in the past, and issues around ticket reselling. Like all this is like you're going to see people exploiting these dark behaviors in ways to kind of generate above average kind of revenue growth for their businesses.
Right. So like the modern day scavenger hunt turns into like, can you steal this or not?
I mean, if you think like a drop is like effectively a scavenger hunt, like a sneaker drop or whatever, because it's all controlled now by bots and the like, and those who can figure out how to hack the system are more likely to get the sneakers that they can then resell on the street. I mean, I don't know. I tried to get those Montreal Bagel sneakers. Anyone else try to get those Montreal Bagel sneakers? You know what I'm talking about? Sarah does, but. There are limited release Nike did of Montreal Bagel inspired sneakers at one store in Quebec, and within 5 minutes they were on StockX for like $1,000, right? And so that is an example of grift, right? And so, but it's built into the design of the experience to generate word of mouth and increase kind of satisfaction. That anyone can get rich quick. Right behind you. In the maroon, the ochre, the burnt sienna.
I'll pass it over to you next. I think Dark Forest was interesting to me because it also touched on smart cities, living behind the algo and touring to a certain degree, but this idea that the deeper we got into the algorithm, the faster we regressed into these like micro communities. And so I just wanted to know if you guys had an idea on what that meant for diversity. That's something that we talk about every day. It's something that's so critical, especially to clients. And so when we see all these patterns and trends of people really regressing almost into these really tight communities, what does that mean on a macro level for, diversity, not just of race but culture and socioeconomic and all of these things where we just all of a sudden you're just like, I'm in a sea of same.
No idea. Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean,
Yeah.
it makes me, I don't know if this is the right answer, but honestly what it made me think of is like, when you have like micro advertisers inside of a WeChat or inside of a WhatsApp chat group, it's sort of like maybe because we're retreating to these very micro, more dark little communities, yes, sea of same, but it means advertisers and companies are going to work harder to find the small nooks where they need to be.
Go for the bullseye.
Yeah, I mean, like I guess the other is that the one other thing I would say is like in a world challenged by climate, that it kind of, in all these crises, that it does build slight elements of resilience. There aren't these massive platforms and, Elon Musk destroying Twitter hasn't destroyed the discourse because it's defederated down. Like, there's this idea of anarcho-capitalism, which is like this concept of these small independent communities that are all self-sufficient and like trading across borders and the like. But, the idea of that those communities being diverse is kind of never really discussed. So, I think it is a good point, but I think it's gonna be like a very challenging one to get diversity in the Discord.
Thank you.
There's a limit on expansion as well. At some point, these have to be tracked, and I feel like I'll pop that. But yeah, I feel like there's a point, and I think it comes across in technology, it comes across in society as well. But I feel like we're going to have the mic so we can get this on the.
Behold.
Yeah, so I was thinking like, I think we're. You want me to yell into the mic? Just talk. All right, yeah. So I was thinking like we're kind of at the point where like we've hit that expansion where I think we kind of want to contract a little bit. Just thinking of just like a millennial from a millennial mindset of like being in like knowing what it's like to be locked off and then fully opened up. I think the Gen Z is kind of pushing back to being a bit more locked off. So yeah, I just think we're just at the limit of that bubble of expansion where we need to contract.
That's a great point. Thank you.
I think we'll take about 5 more minutes of this, so 2 more questions, and then.
And Stefania, if you could ask just questions about beer or pizza, then I could jump in. That'd be great.
So I don't know if this came up at all, but I'm seeing signals of this in my life. But like, our today's youth becoming ludicrously coddled, just way too soft, and what are the implications when they need to like enter the real world?
Yeah, I don't have the data for that, but just from anecdotally, there's like both sides of it. It's never been harder, I think, to be young. So there's that, but then there is the coddling. There's like you can't. I think I saw on headline yesterday they're going to get rid of homework, right? It's like there's probably great implications of that, but that is probably somehow connected to there's some coddling there. And yeah, we've had young people enter this company with very different expectations than when I joined this company 15 years ago. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but there's definitely that duality, in my opinion, of it's never been harder, but there's also a degree of entitlement that a lot of generations before didn't necessarily
honestly,
have.
it makes me think, sorry, I know but it makes me think like those who are saying that they're being coddled are perhaps the ones that, well, we've mentioned boomers enough. I don't think it's terrible to mention them again, but I feel like there's a kind of consistency in who's referencing the coddling. And as they move along, maybe that'll be less prominent.
I mean, my only other comment on this is that like, gut check, I feel that like people in this room, we're probably the last generation that's gonna have the privilege of dying of natural causes, So, right? And like,
There's that happy place again.
Yeah, but I think like a lot more people are aware of that than, as kind of you age down. And so imagine kind of entering the world with that worldview, right?
Wait, what was the gut check there? What were we supposed to?
Oh, no, I just, yeah, it's funny. Like apparently, like my wife says I can't talk about this stuff at home or at dinner parties, so I'm just gonna talk about it in front of hundreds of people. But safe space, yeah, much more so than my own home. But no, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that there's all doom and gloom, but I think a lot of that is probably rooted in that feeling that everything is that everyone else knew. The reality is so kind of fundamentally different because they're not taking it for granted that anything that we knew existed is going to exist in the future, like extinction of species, extinction of fruit and vegetables. Like they're noticeably, tangibly, like an erosion of the world, and this concept of nostalgia of how things used to be, and the idealization. It's like consumed through media of like two-parent families, cars, sustainable jobs. Like they've never experienced that, so they just feel that the world is so different.
Does that answer?
All right, let's do last one, Gita, and then everyone can go hang out at the bar and
I got one
keep the
question
conversation
over
going.
here.
Two more. Okay.
Two more questions, and then we'll
Beauty.
cut it off after that.
Sure, yeah. Really great thoughts and discussions going on here. I like that last point. Got me thinking as well, just around the dark forest seeming to be connected to other things. But I'm wondering if you might see a connection as well with the idea of youthful grift, both why people are able to plan in these kind of smaller extreme communities. People are moving to Rumble if they want to stream now to talk in more terms that YouTube or other platformers wouldn't allow. People are connecting on Signal to plan their group chats. I mean, look at Sam Bankman-Fried. They had a group chat on Signal called Fraud. So clearly people are using a lot of these communities where they feel comfortable planning these things. That's also why a lot of people are being caught, because there's retroactive information that you can pull from a lot of these dark forests where people are planning and actively doing more extreme acts and sometimes crimes. Seems to connect a bit to youthful grift and a bit to even maybe the climate terrorism, people starting to plan some of these more extreme activities. So I'm wondering if like the proliferation of these different platforms might be both building repositories of crimes in these dark forests that maybe people will start looking into. Maybe we'll start using other tools to kind of find all these networks of crimes, but also getting more young people in more trouble. So not sure if that's something you may notice on these platforms, but it seems to be a connection I'm kind of noticing here based on the previous point.
That's a great point.
I think it's a great call out for folks in financial advisory, for instance. It'll be a great future business line, I think.
Last question. I'm on my way.
I realize I'm between, this and the bar, so I'll be really quick. But I personally and professionally have an interest in the future of health. And what's so interesting about your insights is that there's like a duality between a control of your physical health in RIP beer. People are realizing perhaps chugging a 2-4 isn't physically good for you, but maybe like a lack of control or loss of control of one's mental health with Gen Depressed, where they don't have as much choice around what will impact them to be happier. Or maybe they're choosing to realize, it's a tough situation and think there are a lot of things to be sad about, but there's duality between one's physical health and one's mental health. And we talk about the future of health as just one thing. So I'm curious if you guys believe there's one pull that's stronger than the other this year.
I mean, I don't know if anyone saw this Bloomberg Businessweek article that came out this week about this sent a 100+ millionaire guy in the Valley who's 45 but says he has the sphincter of a 38-year-old and the musculature of a 19-year-old.
Like $2 million.
Yeah, he spends $2 million a year on his own health. He microdoses lithium. He's built a clinic in his own. But never once in that article does it mention that this guy sees a therapist. You know what I mean? And I never thought about that until you mentioned it. It's like they say he spent over $20 million in his lifetime. When he's technically 45, but he has the overall physique of a 38-year-old. I think there's, it's just quite the accomplishment, right?
But we're seeing
he's gone from zaddy to daddy. I don't know, but spent $30 million to do that.
We're seeing more athletes meditate, right? We're seeing more sports psychologists and team doctors being focused on their mental health. Kobe Bryant, right? LeBron James focus on it. So I'm just curious if you think there'll be a renaissance or if one will surpass the other.
I don't have an answer. I think it's a great point. It feels like in the past we've seen a lot more, like maybe more recently past, like notice and monitoring of physical health and kind of modifying the body, modifying what we eat to manage our physical health. And it's sort of like maybe dropping down, or for others it's like rising up in terms of more conversation around mental health. I don't know the answer, but I love that you brought that up. So thank you.
That's it. Let's call it. Everyone, thanks.
Thank
yeah.
you.